Aftermath. Quiet as a couple of church mice, Lamont and Nate entered the guest house. Since it had become Daryl's domain, they referred to it as the slave quarters. They climbed the stairs to the loft area and looked at Daryl sleeping, a puddle of drool collecting on the pillow beneath his head. Lamont walked around the bed and deposited himself in the overstuffed chair. Nate stood next to him. Lamont stuck his leg out and rattled the bed with his pristine white sneaker. Daryl jerked awake, pulling at the bedsheet and blinking rapidly. His eyes began to focus and he scooted up toward the headboard. "What's up?" he croaked. "What time is it?" Even half asleep, he knew that Lamont wasn't coming in to invite him to the beach. "You need bagels? Lox?" "So you're a thief now?" Lamont said. It was not a question. "Huh?" Daryl was just beginning to remember everything that had happened last night. "You stole Mimi's publishing," Lamont said, his voice grumbling like clouds before the storm. "No, I didn't," Daryl responded reflexively. "Mimi told me everything," Lamont said, deliberately vague. "Told you what?" Daryl replied, vaguer. He knew by now not to volunteer any unnecessary information. "That you stole her publishing." Daryl wanted to shout, "Mimi don't even know what publishing is." He looked at Nate, Lamont's consigliere, another asshole. But not as bad as Lamont, that was for sure. "She said that?" "She said she wrote the chorus to the Fat E song," Lamont divulged. "That means you stole her publishing fees." "But," Daryl managed, "we both..." Lamont threw his hand up in an aggressive gesture. "Mimi said she wrote the entire chorus." Who knew if that was true or not? She was so out of it last night. But there was some funny business going on and Daryl had to be watched at all times. "She didn't," Daryl insisted. "She changed one tiny part, but I wrote most of it." "So what are you saying, Country D?" Lamont said, a serrated edge to his voice. Daryl trailed off, trying to think. "You should have shared the credit?" "Yeah," Daryl said, cobbling his story together on the spot. "That's what I put down on the credit sheet I handed in." He swung his legs over the edge of the bed. He didn't want to be lying down for this. It was bad enough that he was in his drawers. "You did?" Lamont pulled his cell out from his shorts. He hit a button, waited for it to ring, and then said, "Imani, did you happen to see the original credit sheet for the Super Fat E song?" Pause. "Was Mimi listed as one of the writers?" Another pause. "Thank you, my darling." "Hey, I don't know what to tell you, Money," Daryl said, before Lamont pulled the phone from his ear. Imani was such a bitch. She was probably laughing her ass off right now. "I handed in the right credits. If there was a mix-up, don't blame me." "Ah," Lamont said, "but I do." "It was a mistake then," Daryl claimed. "Shit happens." Lamont looked at Daryl's nasty, blotchy skin and thought about firing his ass right then and there. But he wanted him to finish Mimi's album, as well as the 10th anniversary album. In truth, Daryl was proving himself to be a great producer. That's the only reason he'd lasted this long. Daryl was beginning to create an identifiable sound that spelled commercial hit. Lamont wanted to squeeze every last drop of creativity out of him before sending him on his way. Daryl rubbed the crust from his eyes, and Lamont threatened, "Don't cry, nigga." He leaned up from the chair, pointing a thick finger. "Shed a tear and you're over." Incredulously, Daryl blinked his dry eyes. He wanted to swing, not cry. He squelched a violent urge to scream, "Don't you have a better way to get your kicks than trying to punk me before breakfast, you fat motherfucker?" "Daryl," Lamont said, eyes narrowing to slits. There's only one thing I hate more than a thief." Daryl shivered as a cool morning breeze swept through the room. "And that's a liar." Lamont glowered at him, waiting for a full confession. Daryl wasn't about to offer one. Lamont could wait. Their silent face-off lasted 2 minutes, during which Lamont pictured Mimi on her knees kissing his feet, and Daryl pictured his hands around Lamont's neck, choking the life out of him. Finally, Daryl surrendered. "I stole her publishing," he confessed, flinging his arms up in defeat. He could never win with Lamont. "There, I said it. I stole her fucking publishing. I'm a thief." He walked over to the window, thrust his fuzzy cornrowed head out, and yelled into the early morning quiet. "I'm a thief! I am a thief!" Inside the main house, Mimi still passed out on Lamont's bed, and Kendra, in the guest room directly beneath, simultaneously stirred, but didn't wake up. "Don't forget a liar," Nate prompted as he watched Daryl losing it. "I'm a liar!" Daryl screeched out the window, giving in completely. Nate had advised Lamont several times to fire Daryl for insubordination. Daryl was reckless, lawless, and disrespectful in countless ways. Yes, he was a good producer, but Nate was afraid that one day Daryl would do something that would seriously damage Lamont and the entire company. To Nate, Daryl was nothing more than a succubus with a good ear. Daryl flopped back onto the bed and snarled at his tyrannical boss. "Happy now?" No one enjoyed seeing Daryl teetering on the emotional brink more than Lamont Jackson. It's a start. Nate and Lamont tramped down the stairs and walked back toward the house. Knowing Daryl might be watching from the window, they didn't start laughing until they got inside. Lamont felt like he had done his good deed for the day. He went to rouse Kendra so they could head to the beach. Maybe he could get some sleep there. Daryl was watching from the window. Looking at their backs, he pulled down his boxers, exposing himself, put his middle fingers in the air, and mouthed, "Suck my dick." Several hours later, at the Whitakers' Hamptons property, another interrogation was about to begin. Marlin Whitaker had begun calling his daughter's cell phone at 7 that morning when he awoke, after finding the door to her bedroom wide open and the bed still made. At noon, he had called Ann Brown to get the number of Lamont's place and had been informed that Ann was still in bed. Lena finally called at 1 and returned to their Sag Harbor home an hour later, looking like she'd had a spectacularly hard night. Mimi, too, looked beat. "What happened?" Marlin demanded immediately. "Daddy, we had some drinks and I didn't want to drive home," Lena answered, trying to sound like the responsible daughter he wanted her to be. "You should have called." "It was late. I didn't want to wake you." Yesterday, Mimi had noticed that Lena acted very differently around her father. Lena didn't say, "I ain't," or "I gotta." She said, "I am not," or "I have to." And she didn't curse. The first time someone called her Marlena, Mimi looked around like, "Who's that?" Lena shot her a look, and Mimi managed not to laugh. "Well, that was a smart decision." Marlin relented, quite aware of his daughter's habits. "I don't want you to drink and drive, but call next time." "Okay, Daddy," Lena said, relieved. She tried to head up to her room with Mimi, but Marlin reminded her that they were scheduled to have a talk. Mimi went upstairs without her, thinking how handsome and fit Marlin was for such an old guy. He actually looked a little like Denzel Washington, but with gray hair. Lena followed her father into the kitchen and steeled herself. "So, your year off is up," he said. Lena folded her arms on the table and set her head down. He sat down and peered at her. "What are your plans?" Though Marlin loved Lena fiercely, his paternal devotion was tested constantly by her party girl nonsense and general delinquency. He had quietly donated money to 4 private schools in New York, in Apologia, after she'd gotten bounced again and again for skipping classes, buying a term paper, accusing, falsely, a male teacher of making sexual advances, posting caustic remarks on one school's website about another female student, and probably a dozen other minor infractions that Lena had managed to keep from him. Marlin frequently lectured her about the added social responsibility an African-American girl from her background had to bear. He often told her that rich white girls could act a fool without being branded with a lifelong stigma, but white folks would be all too happy to hold her up as an example that all their money could never buy class. Lena always snickered when he said things like, "act a fool," because he enunciated everything so properly he sounded like Mr. Belvedere. He had once bragged to her that he knew all the words to Alicia Keys' CD, Songs in A minor, citing it as empirical evidence that he could, in fact, get funky with it. Lena laughed in his face. At him, not with him. Sometimes she just felt plain sorry for the man. He was so square he was practically round. She hadn't known him to have a real relationship since her mother died, though he always had dates for social functions. He probably wasn't getting any from them. The ones Lena had met all seemed to be manufactured by Frigidaire. What he really needed was one steamy night with a high-class hooker. That might loosen him up, but pigs would fly before he'd get involved in something so unseemly. Lena let out a heavy sigh. Why had she even come back? "Well," she said, trying to get her brain to work despite the hangover. Her mind drifted to Trey. What a night they'd had. They'd both drunk from the same laced champagne glass, and she'd had the best sex of her life. "Marlena," Marlin demanded, startling her back to reality. "I'm waiting. Let's hear it." "Well," she repeated, knowing it was put up or shut up time. Daddy was easily manipulated, but even he could be pushed only so far. What could she say? She had no plans. Then she thought about a sign she'd seen on the subway the other day. She took the subway 3 stops to Barney's occasionally when she felt like keeping it really real. "I was thinking of going to Parsons." She glanced up to see his reaction. "Parsons School of Design," Marlin said approvingly. "Interesting. When did you decide on that?" "I've been thinking about it for a while," she said, picturing the ad she'd seen on the subway 3 days ago. She sat up and adopted her best, "I'm focused" voice. "I love clothes, and I was thinking of starting my own label, like Rockaware or Baby Fat." Was all Marlin said. Lena hadn't even applied yet, but already she was thinking about starting her own company. Just like her. And she'd be coming to him for the startup capital, no doubt. But it was a plan. She'd always been a clothes horse. "You don't think it's a good idea?" "Oh, yes, I do," Marlin responded, careful not to extinguish the first spark of ambition she'd ever had. "Do you have a sketchbook?" She blanked. "A what?" "A sketchbook, Marlena. You can't just show up there. You know Graham Thompson's daughter went there," he said, warming to the idea. She really liked it. But there is a rigorous admissions process. "There is?" Lena thought. She had heard of the school, but she didn't know anyone who'd ever gone there. She figured any school that had to advertise on the subway would take anyone, as long as the check cleared. "Well, I don't have a book, per se, but I've been doodling. I can put everything together. Where can I buy a really nice book?" "You'll have to do some research on that," Marlin said, wondering if his daughter was serious about this. She was a good starter, a terrible closer. "But I'm very proud of you. This is a promising step." It felt wonderful that Marlin was offering her some encouragement. She was relieved that she had talked her way out of this grilling, though concerned that she had never sketched anything in her entire life. She began to head to her room, tugging at the back of her short jacket to cover the awful tattoo. But Daddy wasn't finished. "Marlena, who is Jacob?" "Fuck," Lena thought. "I almost made a clean getaway." Thinking about the necklace she'd purchased for Crazy G made her stomach churn. After reading about his budding affair with that girl group hoe, she'd paged the two-timing thug 8 times, each message she left angrier than the last. He'd never responded. "It's a clothing store," she said innocently. "Where you spent $15,000? Marlin pressed, his voice tight as a coil. "It was research for my clothing designs," she fibbed, impressed with herself for making that up on the spot. "They carry a lot of young, avant-garde designers, and I was looking at how the pieces were made. I know it's more than I should have spent, and I'm sorry," she said preemptively. Marlin's body got stiffer as she spoke. "Funny, my accountant called Jacobs, and they told him they sell jewelry. Exclusively. They told him to come on by if he was in the market for something icy, which they explained means a piece of diamond-encrusted jewelry." Lena shuddered. Shit! She knew that lousy accountant would notice it on the bill, but she didn't think he'd go the extra yard and call. Okay, fall back," Lena sputtered. "I bought a necklace there, but I said I was sorry." Marlin wasn't in the mood to forgive. "Well, you have to show it to me," he said disgustedly. He knew that Lena had no idea what it took to earn $15,000, or even $5 for that matter. She tossed bills around like they were Monopoly money. He was at his wits' end, trying to get her to understand that life was not an endless cocktail party. "I'd like to see what this $15,000 necklace looks like. Do you wear it with your sweats? That must be quite a look." "No, I don't wear it," she said quickly. "Why not?" "I have it at home in the safe." "Oh, so it's too expensive to wear, but not too expensive to buy. With my money. Thank you for the clarification." Lena was on the verge of tears. Real ones, not the crocodile tears she often employed at moments like these. It had been so stupid buying the necklace for Crazy G. And for 5 minutes her father had looked at her the way he only ever looked at her sister, Alexandra. And now she had messed it all up. Again. She slithered back down to the table, lips quivering. Marlin was a sucker for tears. "Look, Marlena, I really think going to Parsons will be a positive experience for you," he said gently. But his anger could not be entirely quelled. Lena had been given 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th chances, and she'd blown them all. This was the end of the road. He wasn't going to cave, not this time. "You cannot continue to go from one party to the next," he said, his tone beginning to calcify. "Drinking and hanging out with gangster rappers, without the benefit of undergarments. You are a complete embarrassment to this entire goddamned family." Marlin immediately regretted the words that flew out of his mouth. More so when Lena's tears sprung forth with the force of a busted water main. "Honey," he said lightly, putting a hand on her back as her body convulsed with sobs. "I want you to focus on getting your sketchbook together for the rest of the summer, and call Parsons about their admissions process." He watched her closely, bent over at the table, and wondered where he had gone wrong. After his beloved wife's death, He'd known Lena had needed him more than ever, but his career was peaking. The guilt he felt about not being able to give her his full attention only exacerbated the problem. He gave her gobs of money instead of his time, and forgave her every indiscretion when what she really needed was an old-fashioned ass-whooping. But keeping her out of trouble was a full-time job for which he didn't have time. Her older sister, Alexandra, was doing the family proud, getting her MBA from the Wharton School of Business. He hoped Lena would soon tire of this teenage rebellion, especially since she wasn't even a teenager anymore, and chart her own course. "I'm going back to LA this week," Marlin said. "Do you want to come with? Let's spend some time together. I miss you, honey." Lena wiped her drenched eyes, looked up at him, and managed a small smile. He missed her? He was making time for her? "Okay," she said, thankful that talk of the necklace had come to an end without any punishment. "I'll come out for a few days." "Great," he agreed. "But you know your credit card limit is $5,000 a month, maximum." He cringed that he gave her that much. He'd grown up in an upper-middle-class family, but he'd had to work every summer and chip in for his first car. "So, your charging privileges are suspended for 3 months." Lena gulped. "What? How am I going to live?" she wailed, dead serious. "Well, let's see," Marlin said bitterly. "We have an account at the supermarket. We have an account with Grand Transportation, which you use far too much considering you have a car. You have a mobile card, and you get a $2,000 cash allowance every month. To my knowledge, all your basic needs are being met, and then some." Lena opened her mouth to say something, but Marlin beat her to the punch. "Cut your losses," he snapped, and that was the end of that. Chapter 27. Children's Story. In a rare moment of stillness, Lamont reclined in his ergonomic office chair, facing the wall-to-wall windows behind his desk, and watched people balancing cellophane-wrapped sandwiches on their laps with cans of soda set beside them on the concrete steps of the public library. Imagine how many people have stomped up and down those steps, he thought, as the soothing sounds of Jill Scott wafted through his office. So dirty. He heard someone enter the room. Without looking, he knew who it was. Even his own employees had to schedule time with Imani before meeting with him. "I got someone here to see you," Daryl said. He hadn't been near Lamont in a week. A good thing. He'd been grinding in the studio non-stop. He was dog-tired but refused to let it show. Lamont had once told him that sleep was for low-wage earners. Daryl called out to the hallway. "Yo!" As Lamont swiveled around, in scampered an adorable dark-skinned boy sporting a 3-inch-high afro. He was neatly attired in a yellow polo shirt, pleated khaki shorts, and Stan Smith sneakers. "Meet Billy the Kid," Daryl said expansively. Daryl gave the cue, and Billy the Kid confidently busted a rhyme about girls, school, and sports. It ended like a public service announcement, said something about staying away from drugs. He smiled broadly when he finished and looked at Daryl. Lamont betrayed no sign that he was either impressed or displeased by the performance. "How old are you?" he asked. 12. "Where are you from?" "Harlem." "Is that how they dress in Harlem?" "No, but—" Billy the Kid shifted his body awkwardly and looked at Daryl. "But we worked on his presentation a little bit," Daryl said. "Cleaned him up for the mass market audience. This cat I know from uptown introduced me to the kid, and I've been working on his image and shit." "I see," Lamont said flatly. "I know he gotta be acceptable for parents to want to buy his record for their kids, you feel me? 'Cause Billy's a badass kid. His mom's just got out of rehab." "I ain't no badass kid," the little boy piped up, And leave my mama out of this, nigga. Lamont cracked up. Now he was interested. He decided to talk to the kid in a way that would make him feel comfortable. Lamont could adjust his vernacular and flip it to cozy up to anyone from any walk of life. That's right, shorty. Don't let nobody talk about your mama. A beat. So what is the deal with moms, anyway? You know, the kid said, looking down at his sneakers. She's cleaning up. That's good, Lamont said. Takes courage to be able to do that. The kid glanced up. And she got you, right? Lamont said gently. You get a deal, make some dough, help out, take care of her. Daryl was not happy with the turn the meeting had taken. Lamont hated kids, and now he had this hood rat eating out of the palm of his hand. Yeah, but he was way too gully a month ago, Daryl interjected. I cleaned him up, whipped his ass into shape. The kid looked like he was about to whip Daryl's ass, and he probably could have. They were about the same size. I'd like to have seen that, Lamont said. What you were like a month ago. Come on, kid, break me off a little something. The kid looked at Lamont, then Daryl. Confused. Daryl had been coaching him for this audition for a month, telling him to drop the cursing, stop talking about all the asses he tapped. And he was a good student because he desperately wanted to be down. He just wanted to be a rapper like his idol, MC Grimy. Now Lamont was telling him to do the complete opposite, and Daryl was looking at him like he'd better not. But Lamont was the boss. The kid read the source. He knew Lamont was the nigga to impress. The kid pulled off his polo shirt to reveal a white tank top, pulled his shorts down low, and hopped up on a chair in front of Lamont's desk. He kicked the dirty version of Baby Gangsta, his best rhyme, throwing his arms around for emphasis. When the kid finished with a menacing, for a 12-year-old, snarl, Lamont stood and clapped his hands together in wild applause. Now that's the shit, Lamont boomed. See how much better that was? You gotta be you. The kid took a seat, and Lamont bent over him and poked his tiny chest. Do what you know. That's what people respond to. I came up with the name, Daryl interjected proudly, standing proudly at his full 5 foot 5 3/4 inches. Yeah, Billy the Kid, Lamont said, liking the sound of that. He looked at the kid. What's your real name? William, the kid answered. William Bridges. Lamont turned to Daryl. So his real name is Billy, and he's a kid. Very clever of you. He turned back to the kid. I like that name. You like it? Yeah, I think that shit is hot, the kid replied, and gave Lamont a pound. Billy the Kid was a gangsta. An outlaw, yes, Lamont corrected. Is your mom's here with you? No, Country D brought me down. You mean Daryl, Lamont said, not even throwing him a glance. Okay, well, go wait outside for a minute. Tell the girl out there, Imani, to give you some cookies or something. So you gonna put me on or what? The kid asked boldly. We'll see, Lamont chuckled. He liked his attitude. It was all a rapper had. But you got skills, yo. Most deaf, the kid said. He kicked Daryl in the shin as he ran out the door, griping, and you made me take my braids out. Dope, right? Daryl said, waiting, as always, for enormous praise. Yep, I want him, Lamont said. Grimy's going to oversee his album. Grimy? I don't need no over-fucking-seer. I found him. I groomed him. Lamont enjoyed it when Daryl got confrontational. Gave him more reason to belittle him. And that was always fun. You groomed him to be some prep school nerd when he had all the right shit naturally. Yeah, but you think... Daryl said hesitantly, what? You think people are going to accept that from a kid? It could be controversial. Controversy sells records, Lamont said calmly. And we'll tone it down some. We won't have him talking about gunning people down. Everything ain't the Cosby Show. That kid deserves a voice. His mom's is on drugs. Think of how much he could mine from that. And if she's a dopehead, we can get him real cheap, Lamont thought. I guess, Daryl agreed half-heartedly. He has a valuable story to tell, Lamont said, pulling out the standard line he used whenever anyone questioned the violent, sexually suggestive, misogynistic, homophobic, or just pointlessly offensive lyrics of any of his artists. That's what will set him apart from these other kitty rappers. I'm feeling it, Daryl said, fully on board. His mom's is dying to get him signed up. You'll produce, Lamont decreed, but Grimy will work with him on lyrics and help him with his image. Grimes should take him under his wing. Lamont thought on it for a minute. Maybe we should say Grimy found him. He could be Grimy's little protege. Lamont hadn't even said it to irritate Daryl. He was just thinking out loud. He was staring off, and when he brought his focus back, Daryl looked ready to explode. He targeted Daryl with steely eyes, silently daring him to challenge. Cool, Daryl seethed. He rightfully deserved the credit for this discovery, and he would find a way to get it. But he was too worn out to put up a fight. Wouldn't matter anyway. With Lamont, he could never win. Chapter 28.
Until next time.